Jay Bilas, ESPN college basketball analyst. He was on the call for NC State, the ACC conference title game over North Carolina. He joins us on the program. How many career blocks do you think you had at Duke?
Me blocking somebody else's shot or my shot getting blocked?
Well,
my shot getting blocked. I promise you, I set a record.
Well, you were an undersized center, though.
Yeah, undersized, under athletic, under everything.
Were you underestimated, though?
Yeah, probably.
Well, look,
I underestimated myself.
What do you have, Paulie?
In 4 years at Duke, I have Jay Bilas with 37 career blocks.
Wow. They didn't keep the stat of how many times his shot was blocked.
No, I'm looking for that.
Okay. All right.
It was more than that.
Yeah.
It was more than that. But I was a position defender, Dan.
Of course you were.
I was like the cover corner they didn't throw towards, so I didn't have to block a lot of shots.
Okay. You were like a Darrell Revis. Nobody was going in your direction.
No question. I mean, it was. I got my work done early, as they say.
Bilas Island there. All right. So when you first saw the bracket, the first thing that jumped out was what?
That UConn had a really difficult bracket, and there are a ton of conference champions in their bracket. I still think they're the best team, and they'll come out of there. And I thought Purdue had the easiest route for a number one seed. It's set up pretty well for them to get out of there, but it's not like they don't have challenges. Everybody has challenges, but they're not facing a team that can up-tempo them and turn them over, which I think is one of the problems that they may face.
Felt like the reaction was the seeding, that certain schools, conferences that may be too high, too low. Your thoughts on any objections there?
Yeah, I think there were a few seeding issues, but some of it had to do with, I'm sure, their bracketing principles. I mean, I thought, I kind of think, Dan, when they say, well, you know, the UConn region, the East region, UConn chose to be in that region, and then we put everybody else in there based upon geography, the closest teams to that. And, you know, the first thing I think of is, wait a minute, USC and UCLA are in the Big Ten now. They got to fly to Rutgers for a regular season game, and you're worried about geography for an NCAA tournament game? You know, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think you seed it according to the best teams, and you balance it as well as you can. You don't want to be insensitive to travel. You don't want to send, you know, somebody out cross country for no reason when they're the same as somebody else. But I tend to think just do it on a strict S curve and put them in the bracket and let's play. This is for the national championship, not to be, you know, so that some fans have a bus trip.
Any issue with setting up matchups? You know, I always think of Texas Tech and Indiana when Bob Knight was at Texas Tech, like the potential for an interesting matchup. Any issues with the committee doing that?
They say that they don't do it. I have a hard time believing that. There are way too many coincidences that occur. There's nothing they can do about, you know, if you know, Rick Barnes is going to meet up with Texas in the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight. Yeah, you can't deal with that. But when they're on a collision course in the second round, or, you know, things come up in the first round, you know, they had a choice there.
How many teams can realistically win it all?
You know, I haven't really done that sort of thing this year because it was such a weird year. Usually it's around 8, and I after looking at it, I think it's about that. You know, if somebody else could sneak in there. There's a difference, Dan, I think, in getting to a Final Four and winning a national championship. You know, when you get put into a region, whether it's the East or Midwest, whatever, 75% of the best teams in the tournament are not in your region. So if somebody falls down in your way, a lot of things can happen. But once you get to the Final Four, you know, you're playing higher seeded, really good teams most of the time. And that's why we most often see the highest seeded teams win these things.
Has Danny Hurley become the face of college basketball, men's college basketball?
He's getting there. He's the real deal. He's really an outstanding coach, and he's fun. Like he's kind of old school in how tough he is, and demanding in practice and with his team. But then he's a normal Joe off the court, and he's got these bizarre superstitions that are bordering on needing therapy. You know, like the underwear and socks, and, you know, wearing the hat that he wore last year before the first round, stuff like that. And my favorite one was I don't know what they call these things. It's like these you're suspended in some kind of liquid, I think, and they close the it's almost like a coffin. You're in there. What do they call sensory deprivation?
Yeah.
And he went in one of those things, and he thought it was going to be for an hour, and his staff had made the appointment for 2 hours. So after an hour, he thought he was trapped in there. And that would have been a good one to see Danny Hurley trying to fight his way out of that thing, thinking he was trapped.
He's Jay Bilas, ESPN college basketball analyst. We just noticed that the transfer portal is open in college basketball. Why now? Why are they opening it while the tournament's going?
Yeah, it's just sort of their timing for the way some of these school calendars work, the way I understand it. Look, the transfer portal overall is, I think, a good idea, but they could certainly regulate it better and have the dates work out a little better. I mean, I think you'll hear most coaches say that as soon as the season ends, they're busier than they were during the season because of the transfer portal. They're having to sift through and call a million people and evaluate players and all that stuff because that's become the new recruiting model. And it's impacted their high school recruiting. You're not seeing high school recruits valued as highly as they were, 5 years ago. But that's just the nature of the business now. The NCAA put the rule in, and they're having to live with it.
Should we cap the number of years you can be eligible to play college basketball?
Well, they do. It's basically you have 4 years, but they do make exceptions when you have like a catastrophic injury or illness or something like that. And then we've had over the last several years this extra COVID year. So you're seeing that's really the difference in seeing guys come back. I don't think you would have seen as many players stay and play if the COVID year and NIL didn't overlap. Like there are a number of players going, well, why shouldn't I come back? I'm making a lot of money. And if I go into the NBA process, maybe they put me in the G League or I have to go overseas or something like that. It may be better for them to go ahead and stay. So the NIL, we've seen retention of players, which I can't imagine isn't a good thing for the NCAA. They get another year of service out of the players, even longer than that in some cases. And the players are getting more education, which they say they're about. So how could anybody complain about that?
Trying to figure out Zach Edey, that being the biggest big man in the tournament, but it's still about guard play. How do you assess? I mean, normally that'd be the guy where you go, they got the big man, but I don't know, is it that much of a bonus for Purdue over everybody else?
Well, I think you could have said that back in the day when big guys were more a focal point of the game. Ralph Sampson played 4 years at Virginia, never won a title because the guys around him didn't hit shots when they needed to. And Joe Barry Carroll was a great big guy at Purdue. We can go on and on about it. Now UCLA won with big guys. Other teams won with big guys. It doesn't mean you can't win with it. But the game's changed, as you know, and you don't see many guys 7'4". And that dominant. But Purdue has had a couple problems in the last few years. Their guards last year were freshmen, and they weren't the most athletic team around Edey. Edey was dominant against Fairleigh Dickinson, but his teammates just didn't make shots. I don't think they're going to be subject to the same kind of upset this year, but they could get beat. There's no question that somebody could clip them, and they could very well play Tennessee again. They played earlier this year. And Purdue won in Maui, but I still think Purdue is a prohibitive favorite to come out of that region.
You've got some schools, some big name schools that are not going to compete in the NIT. St. John's and Pitt, and Syracuse. I always thought that would help you for the following year. Get some of your younger players; they get an opportunity. And I don't know if these kids are just saying, "Look, we don't want to play in the NIT." Your thoughts on some of these coaches having to come out and say, look, we're preparing, Rick Pitino, we're preparing for next year?
I don't know, Dan. I mean, I know going to the NIT is a real downer, and some teams go in it and they want to prove that if they win the NIT, it's going to be a big middle finger to the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. And the truth is the selection committee doesn't care. I mean, they care about the process, but they don't care if you win the NIT. And there are some teams that go in the NIT, they're disappointed. It's the end of the year, and they go in and lay an egg, and it wasn't worth the effort. So it just kind of depends how the players feel. And, I kind of like that. If the players are being taken into consideration, I kind of like that they're being listened to. Like, why go through all that if you really don't want to play? And look, I mean, when was the last time you remembered who won the NIT? I don't remember. I don't watch it. I shouldn't say that because it's on our network, but I don't watch it. I'm focused on something else. It's like these bowl games. Like, I don't care who plays in the Poland Weed Eater Bowl. Maybe I bet on it with a friend of mine because there was nothing else to do, but I'm not watching.
If I gave you an all-time Final Four, what would come to mind?
All-time final, as far as the best one?
Yeah.
17 was great when Villanova beat North Carolina. I wind up thinking about moments more than anything. Like, it's funny, Dan, like, I don't really know what makes a great tournament. Like, some tournaments where the play is off the charts good, but we don't have as many little guys winning, or there aren't as many buzzer beaters. People say, well, this has been a blowout tournament. I think people kind of expect that it's going to be crazy. And if it's not crazy, then it's not that entertaining. But then you get to the Final Four, and if you don't have recognizable names, then people don't care for it either. So I'm not sure what's great. I just love seeing great teams play. And we get that just about every year. So I can't remember a bad year for the tournament. There was one year where Connecticut played Butler. I think it was 2011, played Butler in the final. It was probably the worst played final game ever. But nobody really seems to remember that. They just remember who wins.
Yeah, I say this every year, that we love the chaos, and then we get to the Elite Eight Final Four, and then we want the Blue Bloods. Like, okay, that was nice. And if you do have the novelty or the Cinderella, then you want to see them go all the way and win it. Then it becomes a great story. But it'll probably be the same this year, where there'll be upsets, and it's crazy and madness, and then all of a sudden you're going to have 4 Blue Bloods. Do you have a Cinderella team to keep an eye on?
There are a few. I think Drake is one. I think New Mexico and Nevada are both very good teams. James Madison has a chance to pull an upset over Wisconsin. James Madison, I think they've only lost 3 times and beat Michigan State at Michigan State in November. But it's funny, Dan, because of all the upsets in the smaller conferences, the 12 through 16 seeds aren't quite as powerful as they've been in other years. Maybe powerful is the wrong word, but the metrics say that they're not as big of a threat. That doesn't mean individual teams. Like Drake out of the Missouri Valley Conference, they have Tucker DeVries, who averages about 22 a game. He's not quite as good as Doug McDermott was at Creighton, but he's pretty damn good. And they can beat somebody. They're capable. McNeese State is, I'm not sure whether they're McNeese and now or McNeese State, but they're playing Gonzaga in the first round. And Gonzaga is still very good. They're not as good as they were the last couple of years, but McNeese can force a lot of turnovers. And they've got a player named Shahade Wells who can really take the ball from you. So they could be a threat. But I'm not sure I'm seeing that many teams. But I didn't see St. Peter's ripping off all the games they won either. You just don't see, you don't think of a 15 seed. And even when you've watched them play, because sometimes they catch fire, like NC State in the ACC tournament, I wouldn't have given you a nickel for their chances to win 4 games, let alone 5. And it was one of the most amazing things I have ever seen. And the most interesting thing for me in the first couple of days of the tournament are going to be, is there any gas left in the tank for NC State after that? Because they're not only like banged up and injured, but I just can't imagine how emotionally drained. And then the NCAA gives them a Thursday game. They can't even give them a Friday game.
I had Stephen A. Smith on last hour, and I said, who's the best shooter at ESPN, taking away the NBA guys? And Stephen A. said he's the best shooter in the building. I will give you the opportunity to answer that.
I am always interested in what 60-year-old men are good at, because it's so like edifying for me to think that all of us are still really good at something. Like, who cares? We're done, man. I just want to make sure I can get out of this chair as soon as the interview is over without falling down and hurting myself. So I'm not putting myself in any of these contests. I don't even play pickleball. I'm going to get injured playing pickleball. I want no part. If that's going to affect my golf schedule, I'm not playing pickleball. I don't care.
So you don't care if Stephen A. is a better shooter than you?
No. Why would I care about that? What I would care is if we're playing golf and there's money on the line, then I'd want to know how good he is.
Oh, okay.
But he'd be the great guy to play against because he would go, I am a +4. That'd be fantastic.
Good to talk to you. We'll talk to you during the tournament. Thanks as always, Jay.
Great to be with you, brother. Thank you.
That's Jay Bilas, ESPN college basketball analyst. He was on the call for NC State against North Carolina, and a big surprise there. That certainly was.